Proverbs chapter 6. So we've got an interesting chapter here. We've got 3 lessons up front, which is what we're going to cover today through verse 19. And then the end of the chapter takes us back to adultery again, which, one of our favorite subjects. And then also chapter 7 it focuses on adultery. So actually next week, and this is not to discourage you from coming, but next week I'm probably going to do the rest of chapter 7, the rest of chapter 6 and chapter 7 all together. Since we've already had one lesson on adultery, I'm going to combine these two and make it one larger lesson on adultery next week. So just so you know. But this week we've got again three interesting lessons through verse 19 of chapter 6, and they're moral issues that the writer is trying to address. The first 2 are really suggestions for things that you should do in your life. They're not exactly addressing wickedness, but addressing some issues that maybe you should think about in a different way. And then the last one definitely is focused on wickedness, and we'll talk about that when we get there. So for the first one, for verses 1 through 5, I want to read the 5 verses first and then go back and talk about them. So Proverbs chapter 6, verse 1, it says, "My son, if you become surety for your friend, if you have shaken hands in a pledge for a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth. You are taken by the words of your mouth. And so do this, my son, and deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself, plead with your friend, give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the hand of a fowler." So back in verse 1 then, "My son, if you become surety for your friend," the first thing we got to deal with is, what does that word mean? Anybody there in the room understands surety? You know what that is?
Like a loan
guarantee? Cosigner?
It's a bond.
Yeah, I think Debbie said it best. Is a cosigner is really the best word for it. It's someone has a debt to pay, and you sign up that if they can't pay it, you will take on that responsibility. So yeah, cosigner is a good modern word for surety. So he's saying here, excuse me, if you become surety for your friend or a stranger, depending on your translation, right? You've taken a pledge for them. You've taken responsibility for the debt of someone else. And then it says, verse 2, you are snared by the words of your mouth and are taken by the words of your mouth. So he's saying, by your own words, you have set yourself up for this. You have gotten into this snare. You've gotten into this trap of standing up for someone else and someone else's debt. Verse 3, by the way, if it's not clear, I'm going to zoom through this, and then I've got some things to say at the end. So hang on. Verse 3, "So do this, my son, and deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend." You've come into the hand, right? You're no longer in control. You're under their power. You come into their hand. And he's saying, do this, and some of your translation may say, do this now. Do this right away, because you have come into their hand, you come into their control. Go and humble yourself. So go, humble yourself. The word there really means throw yourself down at their feet, or some of the translation says, be trampled on by them. I mean, this is plead with your friend, and the word there is badger them, assail them to try to get out of this. Do everything you can to try to get out of this surety. Humble yourself, plead with them, keep on them to try to get out of this. Verse 4, do not give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. In other words, do it right away. Don't take time. Do it right away. Before you sleep, before you waste any time, go and do this. And then verse 5, deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of a hunter, like a bird from the hand of a fowler, right? Again, he's saying that this is a trap. This is a way that and these animals will fight against the trap, and he wants you to fight against this trap. Now, having said all that, let's back up a little bit. First of all, one thing you need to understand is in Israeli law, or in the in the Old Testament, it very clearly says that you do not lend money to another Israelite. You give them money. If if they need money, you give it to them. You don't lend money to them. And if you do lend money, well, this is scripture, right? But if you do lend money, you certainly don't lend it with any interest, right? You just lend it, and they give it back to you. And if you need references on all this, it's Deuteronomy 23:19, Exodus 22:25 to 27. We're not going to go and read it, but it's very clear there. You don't lend money, and if you do lend money, you certainly don't lend it with interest. So what's going on here, if they're not supposed to lend money to one another, that they've got this surety issue? Well, the issue is that as Israel interacted with other countries, they would interact with people who didn't have the same restriction that they had. And so if they wanted to get money, they could go to someone who was a foreigner and had money, and they could borrow money from that foreigner, and then there would definitely be a high interest on that kind of money. So they would go to foreigners for big loans with big interest. And typically the foreigner would say, hey, if you can't pay, who's going to help you out? Who's going to be there to back up this? You don't have anything. How can I be assured that you're going to pay? And so you would go to a friend and say, hey, will you back me up if I can't pay? Will you, agree to be surety, agree to be a cosigner for this loan? And the issue here becomes, if they don't pay these loans off, they actually, under the law of the day, they became a slave to that foreigner. They became a slave to that one who they loaned the money to. So this is why Solomon here is saying to his son, don't get in that situation. Particularly, don't get in that situation with a stranger, with someone you don't know, someone whether they can pay this thing back or not. Do not get in this situation. All right, so that is the lesson that we have here, but I do want you to turn to the book of Philemon, the New Testament. Philemon is in the T section, right before Hebrews. Really short book. I want you to go to Philemon. I'll give you a minute to find it. I want you to go to verse 17. Paul here talking about Philemon. And he says then in verse 17, it's only one chapter, verse 17, if then you count me as a partner, receive him as you would receive me. But if he has wronged you or owes you anything, put that on my account. I, Paul, am writing with my own hand, I will repay. So here you see Paul essentially saying, if Philemon owes you any money, if Philemon has a debt to you, that I will repay that debt. I will be responsible, put that on my account. So essentially, Paul here is stepping up as surety for Philemon. Okay? What I'm trying to give you is a balanced view here. We have in the Old Testament, right, that do not do this for a stranger, do not do this for someone we do not know. Obviously, Paul knows Philemon and he knows his character, and he has stepped up to be surety for Philemon. So again, he's not saying that surety is wicked. He's not saying that it is evil, but he is saying that you got something that you got to be very careful with, and you don't go into it lightly. Now, the other thing I want to share with you is my own experience in this regard. When we moved here out of graduate school, I started working for a gentleman at NASA. I was under contract. I was a contractor and worked for a gentleman at NASA. His name was Bert Northam. We tried to buy a house here in Hampton, and we did not have the financial stability in order to buy that house. They would not give me a loan for the house. So Bert actually stepped up and co-signed the loan for me, for this young contractor that he barely knew. He stepped up and co-signed the loan such that we could buy that house. Now, Proverbs would say that was a really dumb move. Because essentially I was a stranger. He didn't know me from Adam. I had just come on as a contractor. Obviously, he'd interviewed me and all that stuff, but it was a very unusual thing for him to do. Obviously, it was a very incredible thing for me to be able to have someone to co-sign a loan for me and be able to get our first house. What's interesting is a couple of days ago, after working through this lesson, I sent Bert a note and just telling him thank you for doing that it was so amazing that he would do that for me. And he sent back a note saying, actually, I don't remember doing it. But if I did, it was a good investment in investing in me at that time. So anyway, I just wanted to give you that as a kind of a reality check on this issue of surety.
Rich?
Yeah.
So I've not been in that position too many times, but back in the day, I have loaned friends some money. And so it seems like if you know how much you've got there and you're willing to lose it, it's probably not, it's not a huge expense that's going to put you in the dire financial straits. If you say, okay, here's $500. I know I could lose it or whatever, but okay, I'm willing. It's not going to kill me to lose that money. That doesn't seem like it's too bad to do.
Yeah, again, this is why I'm saying this is not wickedness. He's just saying you got to be really careful with this. Right? This is something that you can't just do lightly. The other thing just to kind of remember here is, all of our resources are God's resources, right? Mm-hmm. So we got to be careful with God's resources. We got to be careful with what he's giving it to us. And CT, as you have said, I have loaned money to family members before, right? Lots of money to family members. And when I do that, in my head, I am always thinking, this is a gift, right? Yeah. This is a gift to them. I don't expect them to repay it. And frankly, in 90% of the cases, they have not repaid it. But as long as I go into it with that thought, this is a gift, and I'm giving them a gift, because they're family, and then it's not, this burden on me. Oh, I dislike my family member because they've never paid me back, and blah, 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 blah. And so that's been a real joy for me, right, to be able to help them and not feel that burden of some kind of grief because they've not paid me back. So that's a good thought, as you talked about it too. If you're not worried about getting it back, if it's not going to crush your resources, then there's no reason that you shouldn't be generous to your family members. Any other thoughts on that before we go forward to questions? There's one other important thing that I want to say here that you got to get out of this lesson, and that is he's saying to us here to be really diligent with regard to our debts and our debts to strangers in particular. I think you also got to make sure that you hear, how much more should we be diligent with our debts to God, right? What we owe him. And are we diligent in paying our debts to God, what his expectations are from us? I just think that you got to see that here in this lesson also. And that kind of is a theme that comes through all of these messages that we're going to look at this morning. Make sure you see the spiritual side of this and it's not just about the money. What are the things that we owe God, our time, our energy, our passion, that he's saying be diligent and get those paid off. All right, let's move to the second one, beginning at verse 6. Here we are talking about the sluggard. In verse 6, it says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer, gathers her food in the harvest." Let's just pause there. he's talking to the sluggard. The first thing he says is go. In other words, get off your butt. And it's interesting. He mentions this. Was there a question there?
No.
Okay. Notice that he's not saying, go to the ant, you poor person. He's making a real distinction here between the sluggard and someone who is poor. The sluggard is someone who has a moral deficiency. The sluggard is someone who won't work. The sluggard is someone who won't try to get any resources. The poor may become poor through many different circumstances, right? Some not within their control. And, if we look at, scripture throughout Proverbs, we'll see that he encourages us to take care of the poor. So this is not a statement, a rebuke against the poor. It is a rebuke against the sluggard. It is a rebuke against that one that will not work. The first thing he says is go to the ant, right? Consider her ways and be wise. Study the ant, the discipline of the ant, the purpose, the plan. They work together and become wise like that ant. At least become wise like an ant. If you can't get any other wisdom, look at the ant and learn. Having no captain, overseer, or ruler, right? There's no one forcing the ant to work. There's no one overseeing his work. He knows he must work, and he's diligent. The ant knows what needs to be done. Look at verse 8. Provides her supplies in the summer, gathers her food in the harvest, right? So when the harvest comes, the ant is gathering the food, putting it away. So when it needs it later, right? It's doing all that diligence by itself. Then you get to verse 9. It says, how long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? So here now he's rebuking the sluggard. When will you get busy? When will you become diligent? When will you get off your butt? Because you're going to miss the harvest. You're going to miss the opportunity to gather, the opportunity to get resources. You're going to miss that. Verse 10 is perhaps the most important part of this verse. It says, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. He's saying here that it's a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. You're in this position because of a lot of little decisions. I can't go to work today. I can't find a job. I can get by without working harder. I don't need to work as hard as XYZ. In other words, I have a lot of excuses for why I'm not harvesting. I'm not getting resources when I can. And this person then doesn't know how they got there because they've made all these little decisions, little step backs from what they needed to be and what they needed to do, and they don't know how to get out. And therefore they get to the point of saying, well, this whole system is broken because I am in this situation that I'm in. And you end up with this victim mentality, right? And unfortunately, it seems that the world is supporting that victim mentality today. Society is supporting this idea, everybody's a victim. Everybody, it's woe is me because I don't have what somebody else has. And for a lot of those people, it's simply because they have been a sluggard and they have not gotten the resources when the harvest was ready. Now, again, I want to remind you, I'm not talking about the poor. I'm talking about the sluggard. That is what he is condemning here. The one who will not work, who will not get the resources that they could have gotten, and then all they do is complain about why the situation they're in. He's not talking about the poor person who's in it because of some other situation, some other circumstances that they have become poor. So that's an important distinction. But he's very strong against the sluggard, against the one who is now. Now for us, as we've talked about several times in here, it's very hard for us to tell the difference between those two people. Which one's a sluggard and which one is poor beyond his circumstances, beyond the ability for him to get out. So it's important for us not to judge, but at the same time, this is a chastisement of those sluggards, of those who will not work. Let me just pause there before I go on. Any reaction to that?
I would just say it is very difficult to determine when you see somebody at the same corner every day for a year that they couldn't find a job, but then you really don't know if they could even keep a job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so it's hard for us to, like I say, we should not judge. I don't know how we help fix that kind of thing or help with that kind of situation, but it's a sticky wicket.
Yeah, it's a sticky. Let me keep going on and get back to that sticky wicket. Look at verse 11, right? It says, "So your poverty comes on you like a prowler," right? And the word poverty here is, complete destituteness, no hope, completely giving up, a victim of your past. And it's saying here, it sneaks up on you again through these little decisions, and it becomes like an armed man. It becomes you become defenseless against it. It becomes irresistible that you're going to respond in this way. So yeah, what's I don't know what the right word is. What's amazing to me, it sounds like it's a good thing, but what's amazing to me is, the statistics now say that 60% of the population is living paycheck to paycheck.
Wow.
60%. And I read another one that said, of those that make $100,000 or more, 50% of those people are living paycheck to paycheck.
Wow.
We're in a weird, now those people, you would say, well, maybe they've got, they're buying more than they need, right? If you're making $100,000, you got you're spending more than you should be spending, but still the 60% people living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, our society is in a mess, and frankly, our society is encouraging sluggardness through a lot of the policies and things that we're doing. So it's as CT says, this is a tough one for us to figure out exactly what to do about. But I think that, when I think when you think about this word poverty, and it's destitute and no hope and giving up, we know that there is hope, right? And I think that when we have discussions with these kinds of folks, we've got to have that kind of a discussion. It's got to be a discussion about hope. It's got to be a discussion about Christ and who he is, not about their particular financial situation. You got to start with the bigger issue, which is really hope. So, and again, Proverbs is concerned about moral issues. As I said, later on, he talks about financial issues with regard to how we should deal with the poor. But here he's really talking about this moral issue of sluggardness, of not working, of not doing what they need to do. Any other comments on that? Any other thoughts before we?
Hey, Rich.
Yeah.
I know this is on this particular set of verses on, but I also think it has a lot of applications to faith. And so, I kind of think of it too, for me, this idea of inertia in science, that something remains, that wants to remain at rest until something else makes it move. And I find that in my own life, sometimes in my faith, that I have this, inertia to overcome, this will, to not, to be a sluggard, to not, get off my butt and do things. So I think there's a component of the will and faith that this applies to also. Benefits in faith, unless we overcome our will or inertia in our lives too, is what, for me, I've found.
Yeah, Rich, I was just going that, when you see someone on the street corner, they have a sign on, on their chest, give, donations accepted or whatever. I feel guilty because I don't know, obviously I don't know their situation, and I don't know what they need or if money's really going to be spent for alcohol or whatever. And but I'll have to brag on CT. He came up with a solution I think is a really good one, where he gives a little care package, and I think that's a great idea in that little package. And I'm not sure what's all in it, CT, but there's a witness card to invite them to church, some food, basic necessities. But again, you want to do something as a believer, right? And a lot of times we're torn on, should we do anything, because we don't know the situation where that person's come from. But I like what CT does. Just hands them.
Yep, good idea. Let me go back to Hugh's point a minute, because that's where I was going next. That was a good setup.
All right.
Because I would say this, right? This passage teaches us we're not to be sluggards with regard to our work and our earthly riches, but that it does raise the question: how much more should we not be sluggards with regard to our ministry and our heavenly riches, right? And again, sometimes we slip away slowly with little decisions. We become sluggards in our spiritual life. We get lazy slowly, not realizing we're distancing ourselves from the Creator. So, so it asks the question: are you sleeping through your spiritual life? Are you sleeping through your eternal life here on earth? And then to go to verse 9, how long will you slumber? When will you rise up from your sleep and get serious about your spiritual condition? Get serious about your relationship with God. So yeah, I think, Hugh, exactly. This is not only a message about our money, it's a message about our spiritual condition. All right. Let's then go to the last section. And yes, the last section is the longest section, in case you're worried about. Are we going to get done in the next 5 minutes? Verse 12 says, a worthless person, a wicked man, walks with a perverse mouth. So this, let me just ask those in the room with different translations. What can you read verse 12 for me if you have different words than that?
Devious speech.
Okay.
Mine says crooked speech.
What about the first sentence?
False noun. Troublemaker and a villain.
Good.
Merciless and wicked people, and they
Yeah.
are liars.
Good. Okay, good. So that rounds out these words. What's interesting is the word that's used here in the Hebrew, when translated into the Greek and into the New Testament, is translated as the devil. Right, so this worthless person, this wicked man, this is a person that is controlled by the devil. This is a wicked, malevolent. I can never say that word. Malevolent. Yeah, man of iniquity that we have here being talked about, with a crooked mouth, a perverse mouth. He's using his mouth negatively against others, right? And with lies or flatteries or slanders or perjuries, whatever it is, he's using his mouth in a wicked way. So this is definitely a wicked man that is being talked about here from 12 to 19. Then look at down verse 13. He winks with his eyes, he shuffles his feet, he points with his fingers. I have this picture of an innocent person going up to this wicked man, and this wicked man is convincing him to join him in his evil plot. And he's, the evil man's cohorts are around, and he's winking at them. He's shuffling his feet. He's pointing in a weird way. All of his body language is saying, the opposite of what he's telling this person. right? His body language is very clearly saying that he's a wicked person. He's not honest. He's not saying what is correct and true. And so, again, he's, Solomon is warning his son here, pay attention not only to the words, these honey words that come out of this man's mouth, but pay attention to his, to the actions of his body, his body language, that they will tell you something also. Verse 14, perversity is in his heart. He devises evil continually. He sows discord. Flip for a minute to Matthew. Since we have all memorized Matthew, go to Matthew chapter 15. Just to remind you of this verse. Matthew chapter 15, verse 18. Says, but those things which proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile a man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witnesses, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man. So again, back here in Proverbs, when he says, right, that it's the perverse heart. Perversity is in the heart. In this wicked man, in this man that is controlled by Satan, he has a heart that is perverse. It is a heart from which all these things come. He devises evil continually. He's planning it. He's constructing it. He's scheming to do evil. And then it's an interesting verse. It says he sows discord. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. But this is what he's doing. This evil, wicked man, he's devising evil continuously. Perversity is in his heart, and he's sowing discord. As a result of that, verse 15, therefore his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy. Right? I mean, in my translation, suddenly is repeated twice. Therefore his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken, or in an instant he shall be broken. It's unexpected. It's abrupt. All of a sudden, this calamity comes on him. Let's look at a couple of verses. Look at 1 Thessalonians for a minute. Again, in the T section. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. And you remember that Thessalonians has a lot to say about the end times, and we're seeing that here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Let's start at verse 1. It says, but then concerning the times of the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, etc., etc. But this pain, this suffering, this calamity that we talked about here in Proverbs, it comes suddenly upon those wicked people that devise evil, that are controlled by Satan. Now, here is, yeah, okay, good. I also want you to turn to Isaiah chapter 30. Evil is going to be taken care of. We not need to worry about it. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 12. Isaiah 30:12. Mine says, therefore, thus says the Holy One of Israel, because you despise this word and trust in oppression and perversity and rely on them. Therefore, this iniquity shall be to you, like a breach ready to fall, a bulge in a high wall, whose breaking comes suddenly in an instant. And he shall break it like the breaking of the potter's vessel, which is broken in pieces. He shall not spare, so there shall not be found among its fragments. a shard to take from the hearth, or to take water to the cistern. So again, this evil, this wickedness is going to be taken care of by God. By the way, just in your, those of you taking notes, Psalm 64, God deals with the wicked. All right, so go back here and now look at verses 12 through 15, what we just looked at. One thing that's interesting is you'll notice the body parts. He walks with a perverse mouth. He winks with his eye. He shuffles his feet. He points with his fingers. Perversity is in the heart, right? You see, he is using his body parts to display this wickedness and to activate this wickedness. So what we have then in verses 16 and 19 is focus on these body parts and what they're doing. You'll see down in verse 7, a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running into evil, false witness who speaks lies. So this shows the continuity between verses 12 through 15 and verses 16 through 19. We're talking about this same person. We're talking about this malevolent man, this wicked man, this worthless person, this person that is controlled by Satan. Now, let's go into verse 16. It says, these 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him. These 6 things I am hates. So I got to ask a funny question, but does God hate? Is that in his character to hate?
It says
He hates evil.
he hates evil. That's what it says.
Again, there's a lot of people who construct a God for themselves, and that God is a God of love, a grandfather God who just tries to make everybody happy, blah, blah, blah. But scripture is pretty clear that God hates. I want you to turn to Psalm chapter 11. Look at 2 different verses in Psalm. First in Psalm 11. I do find it. Psalm 11. Psalm 11, verse 5. Psalm 11, verse 5 it says, the Lord tests the righteous, but the wicked and the one who loves violence, his soul hates. Upon the wicked he will rain coals, fire and brimstone, a burning wind shall be the portion of their cup. I just find it intense the way that it's said here. His soul hates them. His soul hates the wicked. And then go back to Psalm chapter 7. Psalm chapter 7, verse 11. It says, God is a just judge, and God is angry with the wicked every day. If he does not turn back, he will sharpen his sword. He bends his bow and makes it ready. He also prepares for himself instruments of death. He makes his arrows into fiery shafts. Behold, the wicked brings forth iniquity. Yes, he conceives trouble and brings forth falsehood. He made a pit and dug it out, and has fallen into the ditch which he made. His trouble shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down on his own crown. I will praise the Lord according to his righteousness, and sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. God is going to judge the wicked. God hates the wicked. God is angry with the wicked. Now I got to ask you an important question. Who are the wicked?
Well, we all can be.
Well,
Those who practice sin.
mhm. So if you're typically practicing it on an ongoing way, you're not saved.
He hated it. He really showed how disappointed, how much he hated it when he brought the flood here. Only saved one family out of everybody on earth.
Yeah.
I think those are the ones for there's no redemption available. Those who have turned completely away.
Are the wicked the same as sinners?
No,
No sinners.
Those who don't believe.
Mhm.
What makes a person wicked?
They're against Christ.
I'm
Those-
sorry, they're what?
They're against Christ.
Yeah, they're not. For him or against him.
I guess what I want you to ponder here is, and y'all are giving all the right answers. I'm not pushing back, but we got to ponder here. The wicked are us. Without Christ, the wicked are us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Before Christ, the wicked are us.
Mhm.
Even with Christ, the wicked are us. We're still wicked people. We're still people that don't get it right, right? And the only chance we have of not being judged like this, of not being hated, because God sees Christ when he sees us, right? He doesn't see the wickedness that really is in us, who we really are. But this is the way God, without Christ, this is the only way God can see the wicked. The only way God can see those who are human without Christ. I just want you to ponder that as we go into these next couple of verses, because these are important for us to recognize ourselves as the still holding on to these elements of wickedness in our lives that God hates. God hates wickedness. Fortunately, that's a wrong word. But because we have Christ, he sees Christ and not our wickedness. But he still hates the wickedness in our lives. Verse 17, let's get into it. Verse 16 says, these 6 things the Lord hates, and 7 are an abomination to him. The first one is a proud look, or some say eyes that are lifted up. These are eyes that look down on others, right? Someone who is proud. Now, why is pride so bad? It's talked about in scripture over and over. Why is it so bad? What makes it so bad?
It's all about Phil.
Yeah, focused on self.
Why is that so bad?
Not about Christ.
It's pride.
What's wrong with pride?
it denies who we are in relation to God.
What do you mean by that, Rick?
Back to the Beatitudes, poor in spirit. To be proud means you think you're better than God, or certainly better than you are.
Mhm.
Or you're taking the credit for the good he is in you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you say it again?
You're taking credit for the good he is in you.
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about, and Rick rightly quoted, Matthew 5, chapter 3, right? Blessed are the poor in spirit, right? The first step, the first beatitude, the first step towards us knowing God is recognizing who we are, that we're wicked, that we are sinners, right? That we can't get to God on our own. And the pride keeps you from getting there, keeps you from seeing it, right? If I have pride in my own activities and what I'm doing, I cannot, there's no way I can fall on Christ, right? There's no way I can accept him. I'm too proud. I'm too good. I'm too wonderful. I don't need Christ. He's just a crutch, whatever kind of language we want to use, right? So pride, this is why pride, first one in the list here, in 1 Peter 5:5 says, God hates the proud and gives grace to the humble, right? And this is why, because without a sense of humility, without a sense of being poor in spirit, there's no way you're going to accept Christ. There's no way that you recognize what you need. The second one is a lying tongue, right? And again, the words really mean a life of lying, someone who is accustomed to lying, living a lie, lying to deceive others, to hurt others. And you certainly know John 8:44, Satan is the father of lies. So you're connecting yourself to Satan when you're lying, when you're not telling the truth, when you're deceiving others and you're deceiving yourself by the things that you say and by the way that you act. A lying tongue, a lying life, a life that is giving off a false, instead of being honest, instead of being truthful about, yeah, I know I'm a mess. I know I don't have it together, and I need Christ. Hands that shed innocent blood. Now, certainly, shedding blood of something that God has created is a big deal. But please don't forget Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 26, right? That talks about whoever is angry with a brother, whoever says, you fool, right? So when God talks about murder, he's not just talking about physical murder. He's talking about murder in the heart. He's talking about you thinking about someone else as less than human, less than a person, not important, not of value, not of worth, right? So if you kill them because, he's not important, he's just something, he's just not like me, he's not as important as me, he's not as cool as me, he's not dressed as nice as me, you are murdering them in your heart. Hands that shed innocent blood, that's what he's talking about. Verse 18. A heart that devises wicked plans. So we talked about this back in 14, right? Perversity is in the heart. And this heart that devises wicked plans, this heart that the thoughts are framed in the heart and you're devising them in the heart. And it's the heart that needs to be cleaned up. It's the heart that needs to be straightened out. And even if you don't carry out those plans, what's going on in your head, right? It's a heart that devises plans. Oh, I wish I could do this. I wish I did that. If I only responded that way. I really wanted to punch that guy in the face. It's the heart that devises wicked plans. Feet that are swift in running to evil. So this is feet that when temptation comes, there's no struggle, right? They just flip into it. They just move right ahead. Regardless of the temptation, it's not like, oh, I'm struggling with temptation. I need to bring this to the Lord. No, they just kind of walk into evil. Swift, quickly, not even pondering where they're going. Verse 19. A false witness who speaks lies, one who sows discord among the brethren. A false witness who speaks lies, he speaks lies, and then he swears to it. He swears to his lies. And the speaking here is, it's habitual, it's breathing, it's constantly speaking lies and swearing that this is true. And then finally, it's just funny to me that the last one on the list is one who sows discord among the brethren. And you notice that is the end of the list in verse 14 also, right? He sows discord. He sows discord among the brethren. So and by the way, when these lists are listed like this, 6 things the Lord hates, 7 are an abomination, it's a pattern. It begins with something and it ends with something, right? And the end is the worst. This is the ultimate goal of Satan, to sow discord amongst the brethren. And how does he sow it? The sowing means there's a careful plan to create that discord. How does he sow it? What are the seeds that are sown in order to get discord? I think, go ahead.
Gossiping.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Say something about somebody and walk away, and then the people he said it to, and they don't know what the truth is, and it just spreads.
Good. So let me push you in a certain direction here, because I think the seeds are given to us in this passage. Okay, look back again. The first seed is pride, right? I'm better than you. I'm more important than you, right? That's the first seed of sowing discord among the brethren, or he's better than you are, or she's better than she is, or certainly we can discount them. It's pride. That's then, as Curtis begins, it's lying, right? It's saying things that are not true, right? A lying tongue. And then this idea of murder again, right? He's not important. He's somebody we can not deal with, not have to worry about. This seed of wickedness in the heart. I just think about small seeds, small little comments about somebody, small little giggles between two people about somebody else, right? Where you're cutting them down, where you're murdering them through your thoughts and conversation. It's little small seeds. And then feet that are swift to running to evil, right? It takes me back to a couple of weeks ago when we talked about pondering the path of your feet, right? You're not paying attention to what you're doing and what you're saying, where you're going. You're not pondering the path. You're jumping in on a conversation. You're saying something you wish you hadn't said. You're not pondering your path. And then a false witness who speaks lies, right? Again, as Curtis has said, talking about someone behind their back. So I think that when he's building up to sowing discord among, this is really the ultimate thing that Satan is trying to do, is to sow discord. And the way he does it is with all of these seeds: pride, lying, murder, wicked plans, quick action, and a false witness. All right, so let me just summarize our 3 little studies here. The first one was be careful about surety, be careful about taking on someone else's debts. The other thing that's a piece of that is taking on someone else's offense. This is something we do. Someone else is offended and we stand up and say, oh, you shouldn't have said that, blah, blah, blah. God gives people grace when they get offended, but he doesn't give you grace for somebody else's offense. So be careful about taking up someone else's offense. Be careful of surety. And then, as I said, be diligent about the debt that you owe to God. The second one was about sluggardness. Be careful of sluggardness, of victimness. And then also be diligent in your ministry and your relationship to God. And then the final one is be careful of sowing discord, you wicked person. We are wicked and we do sow discord when we do have pride, lying tongues, murder of people. We still are there. And he's saying be careful of that, because you're sowing discord amongst the brethren, which is Satan's activity. I'm done. Any other comments on this?
I couldn't help but think of this when you're talking about number of people gave examples where they gave people money, they came wanting, wanting something and they gave them, and I think it's the right thing to not expect it back. But I do think though, if someone comes to you again and they never paid you back the first time, for their own good, you should bring it to their attention. Say, well, you remember when I gave you some money a year ago and you never gave it back? I said, I'm really wasn't expecting it back. But if you need some, just ask me if I can give you some. Don't ask me to lend it to you. You gotta be honest with them, or you're just you're not helping them at all in certain situations.
No.
Gotta think about each situation.
Only once, shame on you.
And-
Twice, shame on
And
you.
what you know about it, you just don't want someone getting a terrible habit, and you haven't said anything to help them in their situation.
Good word. I guess, again, us being honest is the important part too. Anything else?
I had a friend come to me that I used to work with. I thought he came just to see me because I'd been retired, hadn't seen him in a while. It was good to see him. I was on my front porch and we sat there and talked. And after about 15 minutes, he asked me if he could borrow $150. And I'm saying, what have you got yourself into? I'm saying that to myself. And I knew something was wrong, and it was desperate, I could tell. And I had like $50 in my wallet. And I told him, I said, look, I'll give you this 50, okay? It's all I got, but I'll give it to you. But deep down inside, I didn't expect it back either. But we have another mutual friend, and I called his friend up. And I didn't let him know what happened. And then he brought something up that the same guy had gotten in trouble at work, got fired, and he had hit up numerous people at work wanting to borrow money. So don't think you're the only one. They might be doing it to a lot. And like, that's why I say sometimes you gotta bring it up, or you're not helping them. They're just gonna keep doing what they're doing.
And, all of this is, you got to work under the discernment of God, right? Because these are complex situations that we don't know everything that's going on. All right, anything else? All right, let's move into prayer requests then. Joe, anything here?
Recording.